The freak show continues at the Biden White House. This week, the White House has hired a dude who looks something like a cross between the Tiger King and Beetlejuice. And I'm not kidding. There's photos of this guy. He's got this kind of creepy Tiger King stash, and he's dressed in an all black and white striped suit. You'll see pictures of him wearing kind of fishnet shirts with his nipples sticking out. And of course, he is obviously right out of central casting for a Biden communication staffer. But the White House right now is in damage control over this guy because apparently, in addition to being an over-the-top cartoon character, he's also deeply hateful. He's super bigoted when it comes to things like, I don't know, white people, capitalism, the police. He hates all of those things, and he's expressed it a lot in public. For more on this, I want to bring in Nate Hochman now. He's a senior advisor to America 2100 and a writer for the American Spectator as well. Nate, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, Vince.
Nate, tell me about this guy, the associate comms director for the Biden White House. His name is Tyler Cherry. Who is he?
Yeah, it's too bad that this is a radio show because we can't communicate to your listeners just exactly what this guy looks like. Everyone, if they're curious, should Google Tyler Cherry. You'll see exactly what we're talking about. I mean, like you said, he's right out of central casting just in terms of his look. But he was recently promoted to the comms team, the communications team in the Biden White House, which is hilarious because his Twitter feed for the past, decade has just been a long stream of just pick your radical campus lefty cause. And he's right out there on the vanguard, defund the police, all the Palestine stuff, abolish ICE, open borders, go down the list. He's got a tweet or 100 tweets for every single one of them. And he's a comms guy for the Biden White House. He's not just some random staffer. He's their front-facing communications staffer. And he's a total out-and-out radical.
Yeah, for sure. He's compared police to slave patrols, modern-day police. He says they're slave patrols. He's calling for abolishing the police. He's calling for abolishing voter ID. He's compared it to the Democrat practice of poll taxes designed to keep black people from voting. He's routinely just looked at pictures of white people and thought there's too many white people in this photo. He's a white guy, by the way. I should point out he's just a white guy, but he makes up for it by being fantastic. And which by the way, I'm cribbing that line right from the Free Beacon. That's how they talk about Pete Buttigieg. He's white, but he makes up for it by being gay. Is one of my favorite lines ever, ever. I love that line. But this guy, he is. I don't know. He's almost like. Whatever they tell him to say, he says it.
Right. I was going through his tweets just because I found it amusing, and one of the things I surfaced was just what you're talking about, where he has dozens and dozens of tweets of just quote tweeting or responding to pictures of random events, Bernie Sanders rallies, Trump rallies, CNN panels, and just going, there are too many white people here. he just finds whatever event was happening this day and just quote tweets it and goes, I feel like there are too many white people here. Like it's an absurd practice.
Yes.
But down the line, it's every single issue. He's almost a parody, sort of funhouse mirror version of what campus leftist politics are.
Well, it's also kind of a sign, like he's a white guy and he's like saying there's too many white people here. It's kind of a sign that he's mentally ill, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a good description of anyone who holds this genre of ideology or politics.
Yeah.
He's like, obviously, if you actually took the too many white people here ideology to its logical conclusion, he shouldn't have a job, right? If he really wanted to make space for people of color, he should give up his job to somebody who wasn't white. But obviously, it's only that there are too many white people in other places. Yeah. When it applies to him and his job, of course, it never applies.
So what we're seeing now is he has deleted basically all of the stuff that you noticed. In fact, all of those pictures of white people that he thought that he had these bigoted attitudes towards, he's now deleting the evidence of all of this. He's also released a statement in the form of a tweet saying past social media posts from when I was younger, which is a weird phrase because literally every social media post that you've ever had in your past is from when you were, quote, younger, do not reflect my current views. Period. I support this administration's agenda and will continue my communications work focused on our climate and environmental policies, he writes. So what does this tell you? What does it tell you that he's deleting all of this? Is this a sign that he's ashamed of his past behavior, or is it just a memory hole exercise?
Yeah, obviously it's a memory hole exercise. After I posted the screenshots of those white people tweets, within 45 or 60 minutes, he had just nuked hundreds and hundreds of tweets, every single tweet that had the word white in it, including tweets that were just about the White House. It's funny because he's a White House communications staffer. They were all gone. He just wiped the slate clean. But yeah, no, it's the obvious sort of follow-up question when he says, I don't believe those things anymore is, okay, what views do you specifically not hold anymore? And why did you change your mind?
Yeah.
Of course, he's never going to answer that question. But the simple fact is he hasn't changed his mind. And in a big part, the reason that he got the job that he did is because he holds those.
Okay, that's an important element here. So he's a florid radical in public, and he has been for a long time. And so, any organization worth its salt, especially one as high profile as the White House, especially one that's hiring him to do the communications on behalf of the White House, they knew who this guy was, and this is explicitly why they hired him.
Right. Look, I'm a young guy. I went to a left-wing college campus. If you get to know anyone in all of these lefty progressive activist groups, whether it's the climate stuff, the race stuff, the immigration stuff, you take your pick of the lefty cause.
Yeah.
They're all like this. This guy is like, you can find hundreds, if not thousands, of versions of this guy, carbon copies, in all of the big lefty activist groups. Everyone under the age of 30 who's in these lefty circles is this guy, effectively. And that's the hiring pool for the Biden administration. Those are the sort of young progressive foot soldiers that they're hiring. So obviously this guy got nabbed because he was a communications director and people paid attention. But you can bet your entire bank account on the fact that there are hundreds and hundreds of carbon copies of him everywhere in the Biden administration.
But look, if this was my ideology and I was trying to advance it, I wouldn't hire a red flag that looked like this guy. This guy's coming out. He's got the fishnet shirts on and the nipples sticking out and the porn stash. What is it with these lefties overly sexualizing everything? It's like this. Everything is like this big narcissistic sort of sexualized routine. And it's not. This wasn't like some guy who looks like some plain Jane guy. He's got radical views, but. It's a gigantic red flag. This guy is like another Sam Brinton character who's stealing luggage from people at airports all across the country. They have these over-the-top characters who are deeply radical and deeply insane, and then they hire them. Why?
Well, that's exactly right. Sam Brinton is one of a dozen names that you could come up with of guys that anyone who pays attention to the Biden administration know are just like this guy. And those people are strategic errors for the Biden administration because most Americans are sort of viscerally repulsed just on a visual level by these people. So it doesn't help the Biden administration strategically to have those guys making headlines. But the important thing to understand is that in no small part, the Biden White House's entire project has been taking these people's views and sanitizing them just enough that they can kind of repurpose them and launder them to the American people as some sort of moderate centrist agenda. Everything that this White House has done since day one are effectively versions of this guy's views. They just are done with like an old aging septuagenarian who has the capacity to sound sometimes like somebody who isn't a radical, but it's the same exact political project all the way down.
But I also think that part of this seems to be that they're trying to stretch our attitudes to normalize the absurd in huge ways.
Yep.
So remember that the guy who had breast implants who went and visited the White House and then took his shirt off and was dancing around on the South Lawn taking photos and was literally invited by the White House, disgraced the whole institution, after the White House was like, this is a bad thing. We won't allow this person to come back. But, that honestly, their consternation was pretty muted about all of this. And it once again felt like the same dog and pony show. Like the characters change ever so slightly, but the reality is they're constantly trying to normalize some of the most absurd and salacious things you could possibly imagine.
100%. And every time conservatives make the mistake of noticing that they're trying to do this, the story always becomes, conservative backlash to X. Conservatives are losing their minds or, are freaking out. But it's quite obvious what they are trying to do. And by the way, if you listen to these people, what they're saying publicly most of the time, the kinds of people who showed up at the White House to do that, guys like this, they relish the fact that it's offensive. It's meant to be offensive to Christians, to white people, to conservatives, to people in middle America. That is not a bug, it's a feature. They want to be offensive. They hold people that they're offending in contempt. And part of what they're doing is a kind of humiliation ritual. It's meant to demoralize people about the fact that their institutions, like the White House, are being profaned like this. It's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, but it's one thing to live your own life this way and then to be resentful that people don't accept you for who you are and like kind of be navigating through those insecurities. But it's another thing to then evangelize all of this, to be like, actually, no, this is the normal way to live your life. I have a story coming up today on the that I'm going to hopefully be able to get to into some detail, but the international like transgender organization known as WPATH, which sets all of these guidelines for how people can be mutilated and how they can be affirmed in their delusions and all of these things. They were taking orders from this guy, Richard Levine, now known as Admiral Rachel Levine. This is a guy who's play acting as a woman in the Biden administration, wearing military-style uniforms, who was pressuring WPATH to get rid of its minimum age restrictions when it comes to gender mutilation for children. And this is all coming out today. A Canadian researcher getting the details, the government documents on this, and it is horrifying. And so it's not just that, Nate Hochman, that these are people who are trying to change our attitudes by being ridiculous in public. They're trying to evangelize their ridiculousness.
Oh, absolutely. And it's very much about wearing the sort of old American institutions and traditions, ideas as a skin suit. They're not just tearing down statues of Christopher Columbus or George Washington, or not celebrating Easter or Christmas or Columbus Day or whatever. They're replacing all of these traditions and ideas and public morality with a new one, right? So instead of Easter, you get Transgender Day of Remembrance. Instead of Columbus Day, you get Indigenous Day of Mourning. Instead of Thanksgiving, you get another Indigenous Peoples Day. You can go down the line. Instead of July 4th, you get Juneteenth. Instead of the national anthem, the Stars and Stripes, you get the Black national anthem. Every single American tradition, every single unifying symbol of American identity and pride is being hollowed out and replaced with the new state religion, which is the race stuff, obviously, but also this LGBT radicalism and degeneracy that is now effectively the official position of the Biden White House.
Yeah, and it's a war. It's an openly declared war against your family, which is which people need to recognize. Hey, Nate Hochman, thank you from America 2100 and the American Spectator. Thank you for diving deep as you so often do on these issues. Thank you, Nate.